Welcome to Simplify to Scale, a show dedicated to helping you scale a high impact and high profit business that you love without all of the complexity and chaos that can keep you trapped in the day-to-day. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and with decades of scaling experience, I know what actually works and what's just hype. So if you are done with all of the one-size-fits-all scaling advice and all of the overnight success promises, and instead you want proven practical strategies that will help you simplify operations, elevate your leadership, amplify profits, and scale sustainably, let's dive in and get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Simplify to Scale show. Today, I'm so excited for our first episode of the year, and I have with me today Sarah Olivieri, and she is the creator of the Impact Method and the host of Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. And today, we're going to be talking about something that I think you are all going to be really excited about, because what she does is she has consistently worked 16-hour weeks, not days, weeks for the past 3 years. And she models this efficiency, this spaciousness to really help her clients achieve the same thing. And so today we are going to be digging into what that looks like. How do you actually work 16 hours a week and have a profitable, successful, aligned business and all of the things? Because I don't know about you, but I know lots of people who do all that in a single day. So Sarah, welcome. I'm super excited you're here today.
Thank you. Me too. I love sharing about working 16 hours a week. I love talking about systems and processes and simplifying things. So I am ready and raring to go.
Yeah, Sarah and I do very similar work, just in different spaces currently, although I think you're venturing into for-profit land, aren't you?
Yeah, talk about being in alignment. It just kind of like hit me emotionally in the spring of last year, 2025. I was just like, I didn't even like intentionally, it was just like, it has to be bigger. Like this just saying I'm a nonprofit person isn't feeling aligned anymore. It's feeling, instead of like an incubator, it's feeling like a prison. And so I've been on a journey, expansion, let's say.
I love that so much. And so tell us a little bit about this elusive 16-hour work week, because no joke, I mean, there has been so many times throughout my entrepreneurial journey where 16-hour days were the normal. Mm-hmm. And if you think about so much of hustle culture and so much of what we see online, and you think about right now, this year in particular, we're in what I call a cycle of experimentation, mm-hmm. where a lot of businesses are reimagining things. They're refiguring things out again. How do we end up in a place where that 16 hours becomes a week and not a day? Because I think it's so easy to fall into that trap. So give us the secrets here.
I'll start with how I came to it. And I'm a really positive person. Like I can make lemonade out of like rotten lemons. So back like 10 years ago, I was in the process of leaving my husband, moving with my 2-year-old son repeatedly as I'm like trying to find a stable home. And when you get divorced, when you have kids, we worked with a divorce mediator. Highly recommended for anyone thinking about getting divorced or getting divorced. Anyway, the mediator sent us home with an assignment to like propose the calendar that we wanted, the parenting calendar, like what we wanted the schedule to be. And of course, like my son's 2, I'm like, I need to spend a lot of time with him to support him, be a mom and support him through this big change. And at the same time, I had enrolled in a business boot camp. I was just starting to get serious about business at the time. And in that same week, the boot camp lesson was like, you have to, do the $1,000 an hour work and delegate everything else. You've probably heard some advice like that. And so I was like, okay, let's merge these two things together. I had my feelings going on, but I also pulled out like my nerdy analytical. I still have my calculator like right by my side. I'm like, we got to crunch the real numbers on this so our brain doesn't play tricks on us. Anyway, I was like, let me just kind of work this backwards. How much time do I want to spend with my son? I calculated the maximum time with like school schedule and stuff. He was in nursery school at the time. And I said, okay, how much is left to work? And how much do I want to make? Of course, that was an easier number. And it came out work schedule wise that I could work 32 hours one week and 28 hours the other week. For those divorced parents, you know that sometimes you have an every other funky schedule, every other week schedule. So I didn't have the option to like just go into hustle mode. And with so much else going on, I had to work less. So that's when I started working less, but still I was working. I said, okay, 28 hours a week. Let me design the business to be that. But that taught me this lesson that you can design something to be pretty much anything you want it to be, especially when it comes to how much time you put into your business. Skip forward to another disaster that we all experienced. Many of you experienced divorce, but we all experienced the pandemic. And there I was with my kid home from school for a very long time. Mind you, since then, he has been diagnosed with ADHD, on the spectrum, ASD, dyslexia, and dysgraphia. So at roughly age 8, 9, he was a handful at home. And I had to strip my business, like streamlined, simplified, and I stripped it down to one core offer because I was only able to work 12 and a half hours interrupted every 45 minutes a week. But I survived. I survived and I learned, and you may hear me like saying these numbers. I track my time, and ask me about that because I not only track my time, I now pay myself hourly, which is a big hack I learned later on. So I started working those 12 and a half hours a week out of necessity, right? I just didn't have any other option. And between tracking my time and paying myself, I learned that my sweet spot is 16 hours a week. And I'll stop there for a moment, but I have bits to share about paying myself and finding that sweet spot.
All right. Yeah. I want to hear all the things, but this is fascinating. But the thing that you said that I love so much, so very much, and so I want to repeat this for all of you listening, is you get to design your business within whatever constraints you want to put in place. Sometimes those are imposed for you and they're outside of your control, but you can also impose them yourself. If you look at this year and you say, you know what, I'm done with 60-hour work weeks, 80-hour weeks. Hey, even if it's 40-hour work weeks and you're like, I'm done with that. Whatever it is, once you have that clarity on the capacity that you want to work, you get to actually design what you want to do. And Sarah's going to tell us more about how to do it. So keep on going. I want to hear the rest of the story.
Well, I'll share, a quick actionable tip because a lot of folks, and I started out getting to kind of that 16-hour work week I decided it was going to be that way by saying, okay, I'm going to work a 4-day work week. And I had done that before I was down to 12 hours because I've never been that person. I've always been that person. I'm like, you give me your 5-day work week and I'll do it in 3 and you'll just pay me for 5 and we'll just call it all good. So when people ask me, how do you work a 4-day work week? I said, well, the first thing you do is you take whatever day you're not going to work and you just block it out on your calendar. And then you force everything else to fit. Trust that you have a good brain or that you can hire someone with a good systems brain who will make everything else fit. The wrong way to do it that most people go about is they say, once I've figured out how to get down to 4 days a week, then I'll stop working the 5th day. That never actually works because you'll always fill up that 5th day. So, kind of talk about my own journey. When I had to work 12 and a half hours a week, I said, okay, this is my time. How do I need to spread it across the days to be fit with my schedule and my son's schedule? And then how do I make everything else fit? What do I need to let go of? Learning to drop the lowest performing activities in your business or delegate them, right? I always like to think about what can I just eliminate even before delegating? Because delegating usually costs money to a certain degree, right? And sometimes that's great and we want to invest that money, but sometimes we should just get rid of it. We make a lot of assumptions and we have a lot of shoulds that gunk up our businesses. So deciding to do it, and what I discovered, so I did learn, and to be totally transparent with everybody, when I was working 12 and a half interrupted hours a week, I did not make as much money as I wanted to. It definitely impacted my revenue. And so I said, okay, this is too little. Fortunately, my son got back in school. I was like, I got to figure out how to get him in school. That made a big difference. So once I had a little more time, then I tried working. I just let myself work as much as felt right or as I needed to for a bit, tracking my time always. And I was up to about 19 hours a week. And at 19 hours, I would feel each week like I'm working so much. I'm working so much. And this is where I had like an emotional challenge, a mental challenge to get through, because I said, you know what, Sarah, you're a mom of a kid with some special needs. You're a single mom, a business owner. I also race sailboats as my hobby, which is a little more time consuming than many hobbies. I own a house. I have a tenant, so I have to like do that stuff too. So I have a lot going on. But I still judged myself. I was like, how come you feel like 19 hours is too much for you? And yet for so many people, 19 hours a week is like nothing. They're working like 90 hours a week or 40 hours a week, like double what I'm working. And that's when I said to myself that I realized I was like, you should, because I believe in this concept of the Kanban concept, which is the concept of make it seen. And I love to bring that, anytime we're having like an emotional or a mental hang up, I like to make the problem seen, right? It's why I have my calculator. Sometimes it's pulling those numbers. So I said, okay, Sarah, well, you're working way less, but let's tie that to an hourly amount. Let's see if you're paying yourself the hourly equivalent of someone who's working way more or making millions of dollars. I was not making millions of dollars at the time, right? So let's figure out, compare apples to apples. What's that value? And so I started paying myself hourly. And the first thing I realized was like, oh, that's not bad. I bet a lot of other business owners are actually making way less per hour. And then I said, okay, now let me just put myself on track. And I set this goal. I was just looking at it just a few minutes ago. I set this time money goal for myself. And this is where like having the right goals matter. I figured out that my sweet spot was 16 hours a week. That is the point at which I feel I have the most energy and my business brings in enough. I bring in enough money. It's not really just the business, right? Like my energy is optimized. So that's my best work in those 16 hours. I work more, diminishing returns. I work less. Not only is it diminishing returns, but I feel disconnected from my business. It's not as fun working less. I will say that again. It is not as fun for me working less than 16 hours. 16 hours is my optimum sweet spot. And so I set, okay, what is my hourly rate? What do I want to get to? And how do I keep working? And when you really hone in on how much am I making my business generate for me in my sweet spot of hours, you start making different kinds of decisions.
So much gold in what you just said. First of all, the fact that you mentioned Kanban makes me so happy because nobody ever knows what I'm talking about when I say Kanban. So yes, if you've heard me say Kanban before, see, I'm not the only person who says this. But I love Kanban for so many reasons. But yes, so often, how much do we waste time on things? Or do we do things that don't feel quite right to us? And it's because it's not fully visible. So I love that kind of initial focus of making things visible. But I also really love the way that you attributed value to the time that you were putting in and were able to recognize it, because at the end of the day, if you can do what someone else does in 40 hours in 16 hours, and you have the same result or an even better result, then why would you work more than 16 hours?
That's right. And my results get worse when I work more, right? I learned the sweet spot for me. My 16 hours might not be your 16 hours, right? Like everyone's going to have their own sweet spot. I'm sure like if I didn't have a kid, I'd probably work more and enjoy it more. But I don't know if that I'd make more, right? We each just have the amount. Maybe I would, but I'm not sure about that. You know, there's something about being a mom or being crunched for time that makes you really good at certain things. Like recently, actually, what we met, Krista and I met in Austin, and I had to travel through the night because I was flying right when the airports were all told to reduce traffic by, whatever percentage. And I had flight cancellations. And a friend of mine who doesn't have kids was like, oh my God, are you going to be okay being up all night and then showing up for this 3-day event, like at 8:30 in the morning, having had no sleep? And for the parents out there, you're like, one night with no sleep, I'm fine. Like, you change when, when you have that kind of caretaker experience. So you have to find your own sweet spot, I think is really important. And I measured it carefully. I made it seen. And I'll tell you, I've worked a 4-day work week. I've worked a 5-day work week. I've worked a 3-day work week. I pushed into a 2-day work week. It kind of ended up at a 2.5-day work week. And in all those models, I still end up working 16 hours a week. So yeah. So, first is I know how to focus on the right things. And I liked for a while, I worked a very specific 3-day work week. And at the time that worked really well for me. Now I am enjoying working a 5-day work week, having it a little bit spread out. But it's really like I let those things change as the demands on my life change. And it's nice to know how each of them feel and how to adapt to each of those schedules. And when you can do your work in less time, you've designed it that way, then you have flexibility. So like this year, I'm going to do some extra sailing. So I'm going to do 3 big regattas. Each one means I'm going to take at least a week extra off for them. Plus I'm going to have an extra week of intense prep followed by exhaustion on either end. And but I know that I can shrink my 5 days into 2 days if I need to, or I could do 2 weeks in 1 week if I had to make some space. And so you have this time freedom when you can kind of accordion where your work fits into your time.
I love this. So for the person listening who says, that's fascinating and I have no idea what my sweet spot would be, what do you recommend people do to figure out what that number would be for themselves?
Yeah. Track your time. So I track all my time, including if I'm at an event networking, tracking my time. If I'm reading a book, just to improve myself as a leader or get business ideas, I count that time. So track all your time. I like to divide my tasks and my projects into different key business categories. So for me, and it depends on what I'm focused on, but basically like financial management time, team leadership. I call it optimum speed and capacity time. So that's like time I spend leading my team, time I spend refining systems and processes, things like that. Then I have a category I call it for like the right direction, I call it. So if I'm spending time like thinking about the future or experimenting with ideas, which I think you said you were very right. We are all doing that a lot right now. I call that right direction time. I have my marketing and sales time. And then I call it like networking. It's like my email and just conversations that move the business forward today. Mostly. And so those are the buckets I'm using right now. So I track all my time and it goes into those categories. And then I look at that. I look at it every 2 months. And I look at it in relation to my revenue. And so one, I see how much time I'm spending overall. And I'm thinking, oh, and so usually like you put time in and then the revenue comes out a little bit later, right? So then you can start to literally see, oh, I worked more, but there wasn't more revenue. And I felt tired. I felt like I was working too much. You kind of like, those are the three metrics. How did it feel? How much did you actually work? And then what was the revenue that came, a month or two later? Often I find that it depends on your business. There might, but you should know kind of the lag of how long. And then you have to look at the reason why those categories are important is because I look at this across my team, not just myself, right? So when you have a team, and for the listeners out there with a larger team, you need to know for your business, not just related to working 16 hours a week, like how much time do you end up spending on marketing? What's your marketing time sweet spot? So I use this time tracking for many reasons, right? Like what is your finances, time and investment sweet spot? You can absolutely spend too much time focused on tracking your money. And I see nonprofits make that mistake all the time. I'm like, you don't need to like track it at that level because you're not making any money. So get focused over it, bringing the money in, right? Don't lose it or, completely mishandle it, but they get wrapped up into tracking things. So each of those categories for you and for your whole team has a sweet spot. And so you need to find your sweet spot in where you're putting energy into your company as well. So for me, I know that I need to be spending my energy on that, thinking about the future. I'm the primary optimum speed and capacity person in my small business. So I need to not let that go too much, but also not spend too much time in there, right? I love it. I could deep dive in there, but it doesn't really generate big returns. And I need to be that kind of networking, kind of lead strategist in my marketing. And if I'm spending the right time in those three areas, and the right amount of time, not too much, not too little, I have literally seen the maximum revenue come from that.
That's fantastic. And then how do you have your team best support you so that you can stick with 16 hours a week?
It's really a me thing. I have to stick with it. And originally this is the secret strategy. It is so simple. And we're like, really? That's it? I use a Google Calendar, and I block out a lot of holds, right? So Friday's just always blocked out because, maybe I'll want to work there. So my team knows, like, don't schedule anything when Sarah has like a hold in her calendar, right? So Friday's always a hold. Monday, I always have a hold. Monday, no meetings. I often break that rule myself, but just by default, no meetings. Another trick I've learned, because things can creep up on you and then you're like, oh man, now I like have an extra long week. I once a month, if you look in my calendar, you'll see a whole week blocked out. It's called monthly chill week. I'm not really and that's my label for don't schedule anything this week. Usually I have a couple meetings, but it doesn't get filled. My meeting time doesn't get filled up. I don't take meetings before 10 a.m. or after 3 p.m. typically, unless I've, scheduled something, right? So I have all these blocks in my calendar. And that is the secret to working less. First, you block all that extra time out, and then you make what works, you make it fit. And if something doesn't fit, you use systems and processes and tools that I'm sure, you teach, right? And this podcast is probably full of tips for how to eliminate things, how to streamline things. You use all those tools and tactics to make it fit and to really think about, do I need to be doing that? Because if you really think about it, it feels luxurious at first to say, oh, I'm going to work less. But the truth is, it's better for your business to work your optimum amount of time. You will be more effective. You will be more efficient. So even though you will maybe be doing less, you will be getting more done. And I love to ask you, Krista, because this is what I see with my, like, of all the lessons clients learn, the one that I think is kind of the hardest to embrace at first, but the most powerful once people do, is that doing less usually results in getting more done.
It does. I mean, I talk about that a lot and I believe that so fully. And what I find is it's hard for people to accept that.
Yeah.
And if somebody transitioned from corporate, especially if they transitioned from a background where they were rewarded for the amount they worked or for how hard they worked, whether it was a corporate background where that is just rampant, or maybe it was the family that they grew up in, or they were in the like talented and gifted program in school and they were rewarded for certain things, right? We all have this conditioning that we bring into our businesses. And I find it is one of the very hardest things for people to break.
Yeah.
And it's especially, and then you have like, I mean, I love Alex Hermosi, I do, but I really do not love his push to constantly like sacrifice everything now.
And he
so
does not currently have kids.
Right.
This will change when he does, or if he does.
Exactly.
Right,
and so
yeah.
like there's so many people that just push like, well, if you're really serious, you'd put in the extra work. You'd work twice as hard as someone else if you were really serious about being successful. And so we have all this conditioning that if we're not working and we're not working really hard and we're not doing more, then we're just not serious, or we're just not. And it creates this feeling of, I should be doing more. I need to be doing more. And so that for me, I don't know if you see that also, but it's one of the things that I have to work really consistently with people to try to help them break down more of the belief system than anything else about it, because you're absolutely correct. You hit a point of diminishing returns. That extra day you put in, that extra hour you put in, that extra time you put in, you're not actually getting anything more out of it. If anything, you're impacting things negatively and you're not coming back recharged or showing up as your best self.
That's right. That's right. That is totally the thing. We talk about the 80-20 rule. I'm sure like your people have heard about this, right? The 20% of work that gets the 80% of the results. Or another way to think about that formula is the 1% of your work that gets 50% of the results. But I thought it was Jason Fladlin, who's a webinar genius. He said something to me, not to me personally, but in one of his webinars. That's how good he gives webinars to like thousands of people, and you feel like he's just talking to you. So he was talking about people who are like super high performance. And he said, when you're super, super high performance, that's when you go for the final 20% that gets the 80% of the results. And I had this aha moment I mentioned. So in sailboat racing, it is all about everybody does the 80% of the work that makes the 20% of the work that makes the sailboat go 80%. But the competitive thing about competitive sailboat racing, it's about, can you pull off the remaining 20%, the remaining 5%, to eke out, literally, we will do body contortions, like strain ourselves to like get like a half a second faster. It's obnoxious. And if you don't find that really, really, really fun, you will hate it. And I think, and you can apply that to your business, right? For the most part, there's a certain amount that we run our businesses because we enjoy it. And there's a certain amount we run our businesses because we want the money to enjoy other things in life. And if you put in so much time, if you start going after the 20% of the income that takes the 80% of the work, you are not going to enjoy your life because it's going to take up 100% of your time. And that's no fun, right? And I think it goes back to like, check in with yourself about what is success, right? Because more money without time, to me, that's not success. right? Like, and my son has been obsessed with asking me, would you be proud of me if I went to Harvard? He's 12, mind you. Would you be proud of me, if I got a degree in, he's really interested in nuclear physics right now. And I keep telling him what my mom raised me with. And boy, was this the best lesson ever. I was like, I just want you to be a happy, healthy adult. If you want to go to Harvard, then I'll be proud of you for going to Harvard. If you want to, just go travel the world, then I'll be proud of you for doing that because you're pursuing what makes you happy and fulfilled. Sometimes happy, I think, isn't even the best word. Like there's a fulfillment, and I talking about like in sailing, like I do things that make me physically uncomfortable and yet they're fulfilling and joyful, right? So like life is full of stuff that is hard in a good way and stuff that's hard in a bad way, right? So you've got to really, I think if you really tune into what is success, and I think really when it comes to being a business owner, it's always the right balance of time and money where success lives for you. And so if you're only pursuing more money, you will drain all your time. And it's about having that 80-20 balance so that you have, the 20% of work in your business, or maybe it's less. Maybe you want the 1% of work in your business that gets the 50% of the results, and you want the 90% of your time to do other things. Like you figure out the formula that's right for you. And always remember to think about that balance rather than just the money.
So good. So tell people more about what you do and where they can find you.
Sure. Well, I often work with nonprofits, helping them do just what Krista does, scale their operations, build better strategies, learn how to work more iteratively. I sometimes do this with for-profit organizations, and I have been exploring what it means for for-profit business owners who are charitably minded to give better and partner better with nonprofits, whether it's through their marketing, building communities. I'm not selling anything related to that, but I am looking for conversation. So if you're listening and going, I'm a business owner who is charitably minded and I'm interested in nonprofits and I'd like to learn more how I can partner with them, I would love to have a conversation with you just so that I can learn the need of the market. That's that experimenting phase we're all in. And you can email me, Sarah, SARAH at pivotground.com. And you can check out my activities website-wise at inspirednonprofitleadership.com, pivotground.com, and saraholivieri.com, right? Because I'm expanding all over. And I am most active socially on LinkedIn. It's a great place to find me as well. And you can just search up my name and we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Fantastic. All right. So I have one last question for you. And I feel like I shouldn't even ask you because this whole episode was the answer, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say anyway. And that is, how do you scale smarter, not harder, and keep things lean in your business?
Oh, yeah. So I think the thing I want to say about this is to always revisit it, to come back to as we grow our businesses, as we evolve our businesses, even when we shrink them and change them, as life happens, the extra creeps in. So I continually come back to what can I eliminate now? What crept in? What needs to go? How can we make it simpler? It is the strategic question that I come back to. The way I do it in the impact method, that's probably one of the most unique things about it. I use it for my own business is we revisit strategy and do strategic planning every 2 months, not even quarterly. Every 2 months, we are doing what many people do quarterly or annually. And so I was doing that yesterday for myself, and I was asking that question, how do I make it simpler? And I literally have goals where I wrote, because I've been through a period of a lot of change, like keep it simple, make it less, fewer steps, more and more joy.
I love it. Simple, fewer steps, more joy. I feel like that is a good theme for this year.
That's right.
Sarah, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your brilliance and wisdom. I hope you all got as much value out of this episode as I did. I can't wait to see you again next week. If you are a visionary founder ready to get yourself out of the day-to-day operations of your business and scale in a much more simple, sustainable way, I have just the thing. Register to join me for my Scale Simpler workshop at scalesimpler.com. In it, I break down the hidden barriers that keep you trapped in the day-to-day of your business and what to do to finally extract yourself once and for all so things do not keep coming back onto your plate. And if you're someone who partners with founders as their right-hand advisor, consultant, or fractional, I invite you to explore our scaling certification and licensing programs at strategicopsinstitute.com.